Thank you so much, Awiki Day, for that bit of entertainment. We've had so much fun with that segment. So right about now, we're going straight into a very serious conversation, which I know is in the minds of so many people at the moment due to these unprecedented times. And I'm joined by Ken Wanyanga. Have I said your name right?
No, Kennedy Wanyanga is the name.
Kennedy yes. Wanyanga. He's an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, and he's here to demystify a lot of the issues that we are worried about as employees, as service providers, as artists, and even as employers out there. So, karibu to Eastlands Expressions, our digital edition. We are happy to have you on our show. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So we'll go straight right into the heart of the matter. We are having unprecedented times thanks to the COVID-19 pandemic, and we have seen very many people lose jobs. Others are walking on very murky waters because they don't know where they stand in terms of their contracts, probably being cut short without any notice. How do we go about this? Maybe you can start by giving us a brief introduction of what law of contract is and law of employment, and then now we can dive straight into the issue.
Yeah, thank you very much, Josephine. It is.
Yes.
It is indeed true that with what is happening currently in our country, there are equally challenges facing various persons. In terms of service providers, artists, building construction contracts, and such nature of contracts, those are contracts that are covered under the law of contracts.
Okay.
And in terms of employee-employer relationships, those are agreements. I'll call them agreements or contracts,
yeah,
which are covered under the Employment Act.
A lot of our audiences are artists. They are people who are in the creative industry. They are also people who probably are in the media houses, employed by media houses. There are people who are in white-collar jobs and others who are casual laborers. And their contracts probably have just been cut short abruptly. So how do we navigate this new situation that we find ourselves in? Are we covered legally as common wananchi, and even for those who are our employers?
Yes, indeed you are covered. All the persons you have mentioned,
yeah,
are covered under the law.
Yeah.
And for those who have contracts, they are properly covered under the law.
Yeah.
For if I got you right, you've spoken to the issue of the persons, artists who are employed.
Yes.
And you have also spoken of artists who have been engaged to provide a service.
A service, yes.
And that is why I said that the Employment Act and the law of contracts cut across each other, in the context that when we are talking about artists who are employed, I presume they are employed under an employment contract.
Okay.
And the employment contract covers a lot of things: the engagements, the salaries, the parties, how to terminate the contract, how to address internal disputes between the employer and the employee, the rights of the artists vis-a-vis the rights of the employer in this context, and how to be able to engage when people are disengaging from the contract. Most employment contracts don't envisage a situation of losses due to due to COVID, for instance,
Yeah.
specifically COVID. But there, you will find that there are aspects of contracts that will cover when an employee, the relationship between an employer and an employee in the event of happenings such as when the business goes under,
Yeah.
in terms of bankruptcy, in terms of death of the employer. But in terms of COVID, an employee cannot be terminated just because of the pandemic that we are having now. And if that was to happen, say these are artists that are working in a department, for instance, in a media house, it will not be you as an individual being targeted for termination.
Yeah.
There should be a process. There's a process. That process is what we call redundancy, as in a decision is made or a conversation is started by the employer, that is the media house, to the effect that due to the happenings of COVID and such related facets, a conversation is started between the employer and the entire company or the entire media house of an idea of shutting down certain departments because of reasons that will be discussed between the parties.
Okay.
For instance, if you are in a department, or you are an artist, or you are a reporter who gets who gathers information, a research on other facets that are not so key currently during this pandemic, the employer can be able to decide to shut that particular department. And it should not be shutting that department for you alone. It should be for the entirety. Such that when that conversation starts, you are allowed to be able to give your views as persons in that particular department. The employer needs to be able to look at all avenues to be able to rescue the situation, other than rendering you redundant in the context. So that once now a decision is made, that decision has to be communicated to the department and to each and every person who is affected.
Yeah. Okay.
Other than that notice being given to you as the employer, the media house or the employer needs to be able also to be able to notify the government agency, being the labor officer of that particular region, that that is what has happened. And then that particular notice should be able to include what is the package that you are being given as the employee because of the redundancy.
Okay.
So it's a computation of a lot of things and such things. But that is the tail end and the last thing that comes, last decision that comes.
It should be the last
because
resort.
the employer has the option
Yeah.
of giving the employees who are less active or who are less productive for their business unpaid leave. Unpaid leave means that you are allowed to be able to go home,
Yeah.
but with the notion that your employment is secure. Once things normalizes, you will be able to come back and get back to your employment, because employment is a right.
Yeah.
It's a right under the Constitution.
True.
And it is also a right to livelihood. Life to be able to earn a living is also a fundamental right, such that in the event that you are not supposed to be, you are by events have necessitated you not being able to go to work and earn a living, there should be recourse. And that is what I think most of the hoteliers have done with their employees, because of most of tourist destinations have done with their employees and things like that. If an employment contract, just like you said, runs for a year, but because of certain circumstances beyond the control of either the employee and
Or
the
the
employer.
employer,
Because the employer will be paying you for service delivered.
yeah.
But in the event that you cannot be able to deliver that service, then two things come into play. If that particular thing you are doing was time bound, then the employer has a recourse to be able to terminate in that particular circumstance. But the termination should be properly guided under the law to the point that you need to be able to be given sufficient notice and reasons why that cannot be able to happen, and that you are able to be given a reasonable negotiated package for you to be able to forego the remainder of that particular term. But if the service is not time bound, like you are contracted to do something within a year,
Yes.
but it is something that can be, it is not time bound, then it can only be suspended.
You mentioned that if that contract abruptly comes to an end,
Yes.
there are provisions in which the employer needs to take action to terminate or to cut short the contract.
Yes.
But what if those measures are not undertaken? What if I'm not given notice? What if there's no package that has been offered? Is there any recourse for me as the person
you have recourse under the law.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can sue the employer for, if it is employment, unfair termination. Unfair termination can come in the context of discrimination. Say you are in a pool of artists working under the same department, but it is you who has been targeted for. Yeah, I see it happen in most of the employment setups, where they have decided to scale down. Yes, scaling down is a managerial decision, scale down. But in scaling down, they have decided to lay off a category of persons. You can be able to say that you are discriminated upon, so that you will be able to approach the court and sue the employer for unlawful termination of the employment and for any dues that comes with unlawful termination. You can also be able to approach the labor office, various labor offices within the county. Like in Nairobi, there are various labor offices per sub-county, so that they can be able to be that negotiation or conversation between the employer and the employee in respect to what is outstanding between them. Yeah, but anything that is even if you are not satisfied in the decision arrived by the labor officer, you approach the court.
As we continue with this discussion, I want to bring in another aspect of service providers.
Yes.
We've had time and again since the pandemic began, people who have been offering certain services. They probably had contracts with clients to provide probably videography, photography, or entertainment, or they had long-term contracts with. Let's say I'm an entertainment, I offer entertainment for kids, outdoor games, to malls and certain areas like that. And thanks to the pandemic and the lockdown, people aren't able to come and get that service. So inadvertently, I'm shut down. And probably the client had paid some deposits. Both parties will definitely feel aggrieved. Nilikulipa pesa yangu for a service that I expected from you, but thanks to these times, that service hasn't been rendered. I, as the service provider, I haven't refused to offer that service. But now we find ourselves in this mess. So how do we go about this situation?
Yes, very well. You will appreciate the fact that it still comes to the relationship between the two parties. It can be that there is this person who gave out a deposit,
Yeah.
and who is hell-bent on getting the deposit. But he is also a human being. Is able to see that, okay, for long-term service, he can be able to say that these events or these things can still be rescheduled, so that you hang in there.
What of those that can't be?
Those that
Like
cannot,
a wedding
yes,
or
yes. I'll come to that. I'm getting to what the long term.
Okay.
It can be rescheduled. The long terms can be rescheduled, but the time bound wedding and certain key things that had to happen within a specific time frame, and deposits had been paid, of course. The relationship between the service provider and the person the service provider is providing the service to is key to this. Because if a deposit had been paid, it was for a purpose. A deposit is not just paid just for
The sake of it, yeah.
for pleasantries. It is paid for somebody to be able to prepare for an event. Preparations can involve, if it is for entertainment, maybe it is practice, getting people to practice and things like that, so that even buying attires for that particular time, so that even if you are negotiating on what had been paid, there is what we call getting up. Getting up, what is it that you incurred in preparing, and what is the balance when you are. So that is a conversation that needs to happen between these two persons. And these are human beings. Yeah. If somebody is feeling so aggrieved, then again, they go to court. The court will be able to understand. That is why there is a court. The court listens to both sides. They can be able to listen and say that in this particular context, yes, this person has evidence of what he was able to use the deposit for. And you'll find that there are even certain agreements that say that once deposit is paid, it is
non-refundable.
It's non-refundable. And there are also instances where it is silent. And you'll find that the teething problem comes in where that is silent. An agreement that doesn't capture that, when it's silent, somebody will want to get the entire amount of money that he paid.
That he paid, yes.
Notwithstanding the fact that you who was given the deposit needed to be able to do A, B, C, D for preparation, and you proceeded and did that. But because of circumstances beyond both of you, you and the person you are offering the service to, you are unable to be able to actualize the entire remainder of the service provider provision.
I hope that covers you at home who is watching. Probably you're a service provider. Well, you agree. I mean, you're both human beings. So these are unprecedented times. We had not foreseen that COVID will take down things that as it has so far. But Wakili here has told us there are things that you can actually agree as human beings. If you feel more aggrieved, take it to the court. Wakili, before I let you go, finally, let's talk about casual laborers. What remedies do they have during this particular moment, during this particular time, in relation to job losses? Are they covered under law of employment?
Casual laborers, I will say, without being so harsh on them, that they are identified and recognized under the law. But as we speak, they are not adequately provided for in terms of protection of the law. We need to be able to understand who is a casual laborer. This is a person engaged by an employer for a wage of a day. A day is 24 hours.
True.
So the interaction is 24 hours. Such that if you are to go to industrial area, you are given something to do that is not defined. It can be either sweeping, it can be either packaging and things, and you are paid at the end of the day. That is the end of the business between you and the person who has engaged.
Okay.
So that is as it stands. It is on a daily, for a period of 24 hours. It can be a period of 24 hours continuous, but it is paid at the end of the 24 hours. If it is paid after 1 week, then the law recognizes the transition from a casual laborer to be deemed to be a permanent employee, or a person employed now, not as a casual laborer. Okay. The only time that a casual laborer can be able to have a recourse is where he has worked and is paid at the end of the week. He can be able to now seek to his relationship with his employer or the person who has engaged him to be enforced as now employment and not casual labor. There are basic and fundamental things that needs to be in the contract.
Yeah.
How you are supposed to be terminated, for instance, in employment contracts, or how a contract is terminated, for instance, in service provision contract. You will find, and in most cases that is what happens, that most contracts don't cover this.
Thank you so much, Bwana Kennedy. I don't know if you have any closing remarks that you can maybe address our audience who are worried back at home because of this pandemic. Their businesses have shut down. People have lost their jobs. Any closing remarks that you might want to add?
Yes, I will be able to tell our viewers that we should be vigilant to pursue our rights. It is because of the inability of persons to be able to pursue their rights that their rights are trampled upon. For those who are employed, and as we have discussed, who are unlawfully terminated, notwithstanding the circumstances of COVID.
Yeah.
COVID should not be a reason for termination. COVID should not be a reason for declaring an individual redundant. It should be a decision, the last resort for the employer to be able to invoke or hide under the umbrella of the COVID to be able to terminate your employment or declare you redundant. Termination of employment and declaration of redundancy is a managerial duty and responsibility of employers. But that is also supposed to be following the law, as we have indicated and we have discussed.
Yeah.
That there are processes that needs to be able to happen.
Okay.
If those processes were not covered, then you have a recourse under the law. For those who have been terminated unlawfully, you can be able to enforce that you go back to employment. You are given back your work. And the courts have not been shying away from ensuring that happens. When they are satisfied that there was no reason enough for your termination, they'll be able to order the employer to give you back your work.
Okay.
Or they'll be able to slap the employer with punitive charges, including damages, to be able to pay you off, to be able to move on with your life.
But
for those who are terminated without payment of things like that, that is the first point that you're able to run to.
All right.
If there was no notice and you're just told to go, there needed to be notice. Failure to have notice if you are in an employment contract where you are paid monthly or things like that, they needed to pay in lieu of the notice, something substantial. And for those employers who have declared persons redundant, there is a clear procedure that we have outlined that needs to be able to be done. Fortunately, the employment code takes the basic minimum fees in terms of filing, costs in terms of filing, as opposed to cost of the advocate, which depends on the advocate, but it's also regulated under the law. The costs of filing claims in employment courts is in the minimum.
That's good that you've mentioned that, because that was going to be my next question.
It cannot be anything beyond 3,000 shillings, which is within the reach of basically most of us.
Yeah.
For those who are employed and are earning anything below 100,000 shillings, you will just approach the lower court. Fees can be in the range of 1,500 to 2,000. For those who are earning slightly above 150, 200 and above, then those ones goes to the higher court in the employment court. And the fees again, and it is a case that you can be able to prepare and go and argue, because you are the one who was employed.
Yeah.
You can speak for yourself. Just stating to court that I've been employed for this duration of time, and because of the ABCD, I feel I was a target for them to be able to remove me under the auspice of COVID. Court will be able to listen.
So you don't necessarily need to have a lawyer with you?
You don't need to have a lawyer. If you need to, if you can be able to prepare documents and go to court with them, you can be able to get yourself being heard. And it's a fairly faster court, you'll be heard very fast. If you cannot prepare documents, then you can be able to engage somebody to prepare the documents. Engaging somebody to prepare the documents for you, who has the knowledge, even the labor people who are in the labor offices and things like that, can be able to assist you in preparation. You can also approach FIDA. You can approach Kituo cha Sheria that offer free legal services and legal assistances, and Kenya National Human Rights, to be able to, you explain to them what you have gone through. They can be able to prepare documents in your name, and you tell them that you can argue your case yourself without necessarily finding yourself vulnerable to and it's a challenge, especially for the a person who has abruptly lost his employment and needs to provide for his family, pay his bills, to be able to also raise something, to be able to pay an advocate.
Yeah, especially during this time, things have been very tight financially.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much, Kennedy Wanyanga. He's an advocate of the High Court once again. Thank you for your invaluable information. A lot of us didn't know a lot of what we need to do, or what steps we need to take during these times. We are feeling so aggrieved. Many of us are feeling aggrieved out there that we've lost jobs, maybe unceremoniously, as we have mentioned. So at least now we have a pretty fair idea of how to go about some of the situations that we are in, without necessarily becoming so too emotive.
I'll still be available if there is anything further to be clarified. It's a conversation we can still carry on with.
Thank you so much. My fellow dear audiences, you have heard from Bwana Kennedy, Wakili Kennedy here. We have so much to do in terms of understanding our rights as employees, as service providers, as artists, or generally in the creative industry, or you who is watching who is also employed. Keep right here on Eastlands Expressions, and we'll be giving you more and more information on how to handle this pandemic on other aspects of your life.